morning were gender mixed. If this were 100 years ago, we would have boys on one side and girls on the other. So if a boy is misbehaving, you make him go on the girl's side of the room, or you make him wear a sunbonnet, which is kind of an interesting gender bender. Or the ones I find really fascinating is you devise punishments that echo the infraction. So if a kid is wearing gum, you make the kid wear gum on his forehead. If a kid is speaking out of turn, which everybody did, you go and get a green split twig and you affix it to his tongue. And then my favorite one, if the kid is a bad speller, you make him cut letters out of the Sears Roebuck catalog or a newspaper and eat the letters. Which may be from whence we get the term eat your words. Nobody's entirely sure about this. And it seems very barbaric to you and me, but I'd like to suggest that there's actually another way of looking at it, that last punishment, which is, this is a time when we still believe that everybody can learn. Therefore, if you don't, it's because you were lazy. Think about it. This is pre-IQ test. This is pre-intellectual differentiation of any official kind. So if a kid's not learning, the assumption is not that he's differently abled. It's that he wasn't listening. So it was quite common that people were flogged for getting the answer wrong, which, again, you would never do today. And if you look at American humor of the time, which is often expressed in these couplets, right? You know, boy saying something, dad saying something. Well, in one of my favorites, boy says to dad, "Dad, should a fellow be whipped for what he didn't do?" And dad says, "Well, no, son, I reckon not." And then boy says, "So why did teacher flog me today for not doing my sum?" Right? He'd be flogged for what he didn't do. If a teacher got too violent, kids would fight back, especially the big boys. And in one really notorious incident in a place called Canton, Massachusetts, a one-room schoolhouse teacher was actually stoned to death by 4 boys that she had detained. So you have to think of these institutions as highly disordered and often quite violent. They were also funny. There were rituals that in some ways made fun of this tension, including turning out. What's turning out? Boys come to school early and block the teacher from coming in until they get candy. Or the whole community comes out, gathers to watch this little struggle, and then demands brandy. But the community is important because you also have to think of these schoolhouses as community centers. That's what they were. They were often the only public building. So they were a place for school, but they were also a place for weddings, for funerals, for dances, for spelling bees. Elections were held there. Christmas celebrations. Remember, this is well before the separation of church and state as we understand that term. So these institutions were also religious institutions. There was prayer in them. And there were Christmas celebrations. And I should tell you that no account of a Christmas celebration in a one-room school is complete without Santa's beard catching on fire. I've never read one where that doesn't happen. And I'm sure it did happen in many places. You think about it, right? This is the era before electricity. Everything's candlelit, and Santa has like this big cotton beard. It would happen. The other thing that they would do as a community to raise money for the school is they would have things called box socials. And in a box social, what would happen is the young women of the town would prepare box lunches or suppers, and the young men of the town would bid on these, auction style. But the key here is that if you won a box lunch or supper, you also won the privilege of dining with the young lady who had prepared the lunch or supper. And so this was also, of course, a form of courtship, and there was all sorts of anxiety among the boys trying to figure out who had prepared which lunch. So now I think it's time, I hope, for some questions from you about what this institution looked and felt like.
Well, thank you so much, John. You have really given us some wonderful insight into what it was like in these one-room schoolhouses. Such great stories, and I, for one, will think twice when I hear "eat your words" the next time. What an interesting story. We've got some questions for you from our audience, and we want to begin with Barbara Lyman. Barbara is the provost here at Shippensburg University. And before you get to your question, Barbara, I'd like for you to share with us a little bit about Shippensburg and the wonderful history that's here.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here today. I'm very happy to share a few words about the history of Shippensburg University. I want to go back to some of the things that you said about the history of the Little Red Schoolhouse in which we're standing here today. It's through the generosity of Shippensburg University alumni, many of whom were teachers, that we are able to be here. They were interested, as you mentioned, in 1969 in having the Mount Jackson School, which had also been known, by the way, by the more rustic name, the Potato School. They were interested in having that school brought to the campus of Shippensburg University. And so they raised the funding so that it could be dismantled on the site where it was in Newburgh, 9 miles from here, and brought to our campus and reconstructed. I believe that they were interested in having this happen because they saw the Mount Jackson School, the Little Red Schoolhouse, as very closely connected to the history of this university. Shippensburg University has its origins as the Cumberland Valley Normal School, whose primary purpose was to prepare teachers to serve the region. We're very proud of that history, and I want to say that in the early days, when we were established in 1871, 140 years ago, that as a matter of fact, the head of the school was called the principal. And so Dr. Rood, if he had been the leader at that time, would not have been President Rood, but Principal Rood. And so in having the Little Red Schoolhouse here, of course, we're reminded of those origins where we began as an institution devoted to preparing teachers. We have evolved considerably over that time. And the result is that we've expanded our programs. Most recently, that has taken the form of being approved to offer the first engineering degree that this institution has ever offered. This is a computer engineering degree. But we continue with the founding philosophy of the institution that you can find expressed. If we had time, we could walk over to Rowland Hall this morning, and above the entrance door there, we would see the expression, learn and serve. So we continue to learn and serve. We think that we do this very well. We've received numerous recognitions and rankings for this. One of the things that I will mention is that we happen to have the highest four-year graduation rate of any institution in our 14-member system. So we're very dedicated. We hope that we exemplify the dedication of the teachers who once served in this very building. Now, I would like to address a question to our speaker today, and my question begins with the fact that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has spent $2 billion investing over a 10-year period in an initiative called the Small Schools Program. And an investment in something called the Small Schools Program suggests that there are reasons to believe that students could be more successful if they were educated in institutions that were perhaps more like the one-room schoolhouse, such as the one we're in today. And so my question for you is, as we continue to work as a society on improving our schools, including redesigning them as smaller institutions, what are some of the characteristics of the one-room schoolhouse that should perhaps be kept in mind?
Well, I think the appeal of the small learning communities and of small in general does reflect our history in the one-room schoolhouse, and particularly a yearning for a personal environment, an environment where the kids all know each other and know their teacher, and most of all, where parents are intimately attached to the institution, where they feel invested in it, literally and figuratively. And I think those are all qualities of the one-room schoolhouse that all of us should be trying to recapture. I'd caution, however, about trying to recapture every aspect of the one-room schoolhouse, because I think the pedagogy in the one-room schoolhouse, as well as often the systems of discipline, are probably ones that most parents, most kids, most educators wouldn't necessarily want to abide by today.
Thank you for being here today, first of all. And I actually read your book. And I watched you on YouTube do a presentation, and one of
Maybe you
the
should get out more.
I know. My husband won't take me. My husband actually did attend a one-room schoolhouse, so did Dr. Forsyth, and I actually attended the same two-room schoolhouse that my grandfather, who would have been 101 on Tuesday, attended.
And where was this?
It was in West Virginia. Dr. Forsyth were in Pennsylvania. But one of the fascinating things, and I teach here, and I have students, and I've had students come here and do culminating projects in collaboration with public schools. But one of the things I was really interested in, and I was reading stuff about, was when there's a restoration for old schoolhouses, because I see them all the time deteriorating and no one getting involved. And I'd really like to start somewhere here at the university with our college students, particularly in education, in my area, special ed, of getting them involved and restoring and making sure there's no more we lose.
There are organizations all over the country doing that, and I think the largest one, kind of the clearinghouse of information, is called the Country Schoolhouse Association of America, which is a wonderful organization, and I'd encourage anybody who's interested in doing this to get in touch with them. I can also tell you that of those 200,000 schools from 1913, we think that 10% are still standing in some form. And that's the important caveat. So most of them are private residences, but then, somewhere in Michigan, there's the Little Red Schoolhouse pediatrician's office. They converted it into a doctor's office, and there are Little Red Schoolhouse shops and other kinds of business enterprises. But I think it's fair to say that most people probably don't know that the structure that they're living in or working in actually was a one-room school.
Okay, I'm interested more in the different forms of discipline that you discussed, because I attended a one-room schoolhouse from the time I was in grade 1 through 8, and then did the tours here at the schoolhouse from '86 until I retired in 2010. So there were many people who came here over on the board. We had different celebrations of people who had attended this particular school. And yes, the paddling was mentioned, and we do agree that was humiliating and would not be permitted today.
Well, but it is in some places.
But it may be in some places.
Yeah.
However, when I talked to some of the alumni who wanted this school moved here before they passed away, they mentioned it was because they didn't want this institution to forget its roots in teacher preparation, as often does when something expands. They recalled more wonderful stories, the rich stories of the relationship building. And my children say to me today that they don't have those close bonds that happened years ago. So my question to you is, what do we do in schools today to assure that quality relationships happen regardless of the size, and that we don't make one judgment saying, well, one-room schools was humiliating. I don't consider it humiliating at all, in that I happen to have close bonds with people who entered many different occupations. And it's amazing when we get together, because they all will say, our children today cannot go back and have quality interactions with people that they've gone to school with today. So my challenge is, what do we do? What do you think?
Well, look, I think it's a fascinating question. Let me just say that I don't think there's anything inconsistent between strong and perhaps even corporal punishment and strong communal bonds. Indeed, they may have been related. It may well be that one of the reasons that the one-room schoolhouse was able to keep people, if you will, together and promote the sort of communal feeling that you're describing is that they interdicted dissent and disorder very harshly and strongly. And one of the ways they did it was through, making the boy sit on the girl's side, or, I didn't even tell you about the one where you make the boy hold his ears by putting them through his legs. I'm now too old to do that. So this is not inconsistent with creating a strong communal feeling. It may actually have lain at the heart of it, because if you have too much disorder, how are you going to keep people together?
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Zimmerman. Based on your travels and your research, talking to parents, do you think that there are some parents that would very much like to see the one-room schoolhouse come back?
Absolutely. I mean, when I do talks of this kind, it's quite clear, and I